This episode is with the brilliant Barry Ryan. Now, Barry is the MD and Creative Director for Free at Last Television. Now, Free at Last have produced a number of brilliant shows, including Agatha Raisin, which is a hit on Sky. Sit back and listen to my conversation with Barry. Please like, subscribe and follow. Today, this interview is with Barry Ryan. Now, Barry is the MD and the Creative Director of Free at Last Television. Good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you so much for taking part.
A pleasure.
Where did it all begin for you, and what was your inspiration to get into the television, the tough television world?
Right, so I am the crown queen of false starts. So, I can remember the moment that I decided that I would work in television, and I knew I would do it. It took a long time, but I was probably around 5. That's when my obsession with television started. I was a voracious kid who knew every show and wanted to be in every show and wanted to be a part of what I could see was quite magical. I was very drawn by the mystery of telly, because back then, when I'm talking about, there were 2 channels, and there were and the magic box in the corner was the entertainer. So I had several goes at television from several angles. So my big break was being in the audience of Tiswas when I was about 9 years old, and that coming from the land of Tiswas, coming from Birmingham, that was the crown jewel of kids TV at the time. Everything else was very, very stable and very
Passe.
staid, right? And Tiswas was anarchy, and and if anyone knows anything about me, it's that anarchy is one of my keywords. I thrive in chaos. And then, so I was, that was it then, it was confirmed. Once I'd seen a bit behind the curtain, there was nothing that was going to stop me. In Birmingham, we were gifted when I was about 14 with a terrible TV music show called Look Here, hosted by Toyah Wilcox, another Brummy, and a guy called Chris Phipps. I didn't know anything about it, but it was rubbish. And I was writing for a local music magazine at the time called Brum Beat. See what they did there?
Yeah.
And but I was writing for Brum Beat, although the people who published Brum Beat thought I was significantly older. So I was writing reviews and stuff of music and going to gigs with the idea that I wasn't a 14-year-old kid who was still at school. And so I wrote in to the BBC and told them how rubbish I thought their show was. And then I got home from school one day, and my lovely mother, who lived in fear of things like the BBC after the pub bombings, said to me, "The BBC have rung for you. What have you done now?" Because she thought I was in trouble. So I rang the bloke back, and he said, "Look, the only reason I'm the presenter is because I only had 2 weeks to set it up. If you think you can do better, come in and do it." So I did. So then for a couple of years, I was a presenter and a stringer for music shows, which meant that I found stories or found bands for them to put on. And I was doing a show on Channel 4. We had very posh producers who didn't really like the way I spoke and didn't like the way I was. And at the time, I had a white Mohican, and I wore anything I wanted to, and I sometimes high heels. And I was quite confrontational as an interviewer. And they said, we got decommissioned because the show was crap. And he said to me, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I might have a go doing what you do. Fancy a bit of producing." And he said, "People like you don't do what people like me do." And he's never been out of my head. He's lived rent-free in my head forever. And everything I've done since has been because of that conversation.
Good for you, man.
Every single thing. So he didn't last long after that show, because I did Google him when the internet was invented. So, and then, gosh, it's actually coming to do it every day as a proper job came when I was quite late in life. I'd been back to university, done a degree, got a scholarship. Couldn't afford to live on the scholarship, so I took a job in the university, and I worked at the Cultural Industries Unit in City University in London. And my boss, who was mad but brilliant, set and her team, which I was part of, we set up a record label in 15 prisons and young offenders institutes with lifers, which ran as a scheme funded by Nesta, which is one of the very first bits of the European Union that was bestowing funding on the disadvantaged parts of the broken UK system. So we did that, and then when Michael Howard became Home Secretary, he closed our access down. He couldn't take our money, but he closed our access down. So I made a film called Music is the Key, 20-minute film about why rehabilitation is power, why reoffending is down to literacy, education, opportunity, access, all of those things. The film was shown at the BFI in London, and then went on a tour of community centres, and then the BBC said, we want to show it. They showed it, and then they said to me, there's a scheme for trainee producers happening, the closing date's Friday, you should apply. So I applied, and then I got the job, and that's how I got into television becoming my profession.
Wow. Can I take you back? Because at 14 years old, what's that, 1979? If you don't mind me dating you.
78.
78. So you're talking about probably the best period or start of music for me. You know, the Sex Pistols were in full flight, the Clash, Adam and the Ants, Whipping My Valise, all that sort of stuff. What sort of bands did you get onto this program? I mean, you're
basically Birmingham has always had them. We're really underrated as a city, but we've always had like a premier and premium music scene. So there were loads of local bands that, they were, so I mean we've always thrived at metal. So obviously Magnum and Quartz and Jameson Raid and all of that. But also remember that around this time was when, the Rum Runner and the Hysteria and Holy City Zoo, and, we had bands like Fashion and, the early days of Swans Away and all the art school bands that were coming through. So, there was a myriad of stuff to choose from. But I remember this show had B.A. Robertson on, and I was like, what the, who? I mean, there's loads of other shows he could be on. What's he doing on a Birmingham one?
Yeah.
So, that was my beef, really, was about the casting of it. And also at the time I wasn't really enamored with Toyah, you know what I mean? It was just such a lazy bit of telly. And then so there was a really great soul band that we had in Birmingham called Feelabilia. We put them on. There were loads, I mean, and it was also that mad year, those mad post-punk years where kind of genre blurred, and there was loads of, like if you remember that band Praying Mantis, sometimes there were metal on the face of it, but underneath it, they were kind of experimental jazz, and it was, there was no reason for any TV show or music or outlet to be so narrow or so naff.
You see,
so I put my hand in the air and said, I think you're being a bit narrow and naff, probably not in less polite terms than that.
Yeah. Because Toyah at that time had just done Jubilee. Yeah, and she was just about to go up, which Jubilee had Adamant and a lot of the punk bands in there. And then she went on to her role as Spider in Quadrophenia in 79.
Yeah.
So she crossed a massive divide, and she became more popular within within culture, if you like. And then
she'd done Shakespeare.
Had she really?
Yeah, she'd done either Hamlet. She'd done something, and then she'd done something like a John Fowles adaptation, like The Magus, I think, with Laurence Olivier.
Right.
So, but she was like, she was a bit Marmite in Brum, and it was obviously she was Marmite for all the terrible reasons. One, she was a girl. Two, she was really posh, like proper posh, and she had a lisp. So there was lots to go, oh, There's lots of sticks to beat her with, and obviously we grabbed them and walloped her. But you know, obviously the longevity of her career is incredible.
Oh, it is, and she's
like we were toying with the idea of going to see her just to see what it's like when she sings 21st Century Schizoid Man with her husband. What's that going to be like?
What's his name from King's Crimson?
Robert Fripp.
Robert Fripp from King Crimson. And of course, I actually enjoyed Anthem. I thought that was a great album, if I'm honest with you.
The first one?
Yeah, that was...
I Want to Be Free.
Yeah, well constructed, that album. But as I say, we're of a similar age and similar music choices. And of course, then 79, you had the two-tone explosion.
Yeah, incredible. Which is a Brum thing.
Yeah,
you know, a Midlands thing. I mean, you know, there was lots of turf wars, and there still are. But it's still the West Midlands, and we still, you know, rock the world with the stuff we put out there.
And Banks is bitter. Yeah, but you see, people forget that Page and Plant came from just up the road, didn't they? They're
and Sabbath.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's it's brilliant. So you're
the best Beatles tribute band in the history of Beatles tribute bands, Electric Light Orchestra.
Oh yeah, well of course, yeah. He's just about to hang up his guitar, isn't he? He's going to do one more gig and that'll be it. But the
Hyde Park and I'm Going.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think they're magical. In fact, I was listening to them the other night. Wild West Hero has got to be in my top 10 favourite songs of all time. It's just absolutely incredible.
It's a masterpiece, I think. But then they, you know, like there are some absolutely corking horror shows, aren't there? Like, why did they ever make The Diary of Horace Wimp?
Yeah, but that's got a place, hasn't it? I mean, the lyrics of that are still, but it's very theatrical, because if you look at the way that Queen wrote their songs, and they chose A Night at the Opera and the other Marx Brothers films, everything was built around theatrics. And ELO, as you say, they took on the Beatles, Yellow Submarine, and things like that. They were the next bit on, and it is just a magical piece of music. I think there's a place for the Diary of Horace Wimp. I think that they're quite good from that perspective. So you've
got limited time left, though, Paul.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. But if I've got limited time left, I don't want any of it to be occupied with The Diary of Horace Wimp. Play me something new.
Yeah. You're probably right. So you're at the BBC. They've taken you on.
Yeah.
How did you find that experience? Because they were very posh, weren't they? I mean, you had to speak in a particular way.
Well, so I didn't for a start, because that wasn't going to happen. So it was a weird thing. So because at the time I didn't really have a job. I was doing lots of things. So like cut to 2 years earlier, and I'd met my husband, and on the third day he said to me, can we just, before we have a drink, can I just ask you something? I went, yeah. And he went, what do you do for a living? Because I can't remember. And I said, oh, that's because I've got 5 jobs, love. And so I was writing for magazines, The Face, Blitz, NME, all sorts of things. And then I was managing a couple of artists, including Najma Akhtar, who was a fantastic Asian performer, and another rock band. And I was doing a bit of stand-up every now and then, and I was doing, I was working in the university, and then I was running a nightclub. So it depended on what time of year, you know, because some of it was seasonal. But I didn't have one source of income. And suddenly I went to having one source of income that was probably a fifth of what I'd been earning before. So the drop in salary was a massive shock. But then also then having no time to do anything else other than this job was a shock as well. And so the first thing that and also because I'd done everything based on what I wanted to do rather than what was a good idea to do, suddenly I had to readjust all of that. So the first thing that they made me do was was to move to Bristol, and I was producing a show called 999. And at the time, I'd never watched 999 in my life before. I knew that was about bad things happening to people, and then them telling you about it would make it better for anyone else who experienced that. That's all I knew, but I'd never actually seen the show. And then that was a shock, because suddenly I wasn't doing music, I wasn't doing entertainment or comedy, and I wasn't in charge of the story. Suddenly I had to learn to tell other people's stories. So it was a really great learning curve for me, and I had a great time on that show, and I met some lifelong friends on it. You know, there's a load of people I met that very first day who I still see all the time now. And then, but the whole thing of working at the BBC was a bit of a culture shock, because it was that thing where suddenly me talking in an unfiltered way was quite shocking to some people. On the second day that I was there, they had a soiree with us lot, you know, these 11 people who the BBC thought were the best of the new people to hire. We were all quite different. I was definitely the oldest. I was 30 when I started on the scheme. So I was the oldest newcomer ever. And I was at this soiree, and the scheme manager person was doing this, come over. So I went over, and she was with the head of BBC Two at the time. And as I approached, I heard her say, "Oh, this is one of our regionals. Wait till you hear the accent." And being me, I kind of thought, I can't ignore that. So I said, "Yeah, it's Lingua Phone Love. I've got the cassettes at home. Do you want to borrow one?" Because it's just nonsense, isn't it? You know, it's that thing.
It's rude.
If there was a cynical thing where I was recruited for the way I sound, then tell me, and let's celebrate it together. You know what I mean? Don't have this kind of sneaky agenda. So I always had a bit of I am a person that can have I don't have a chip on my shoulder. I've got a whole plate of them. And, you know, those things fester with me. It didn't spoil my experience, but it made me think, what's this about? So, and then I thought, then I hope I used it to the best of its opportunity. But I kind of thought that at that point, it kind of gave me an insight into suddenly where I was and what I was doing. And then it made me think, I can't be doing this for life. And I never I was back and forth. I left many times. I went back and left and went back and left.
Right.
But I always knew that I always had to have that light at the end of the tunnel where I could walk away.
Yeah. Because hadn't you been on the Tube or worked on the Tube when it was?
Yeah, I was a stringer for the Tube.
And what does a stringer actually do?
I auditioned to be a presenter. They didn't want me, but they knew that I knew some stuff. So a stringer is somebody that submits ideas for features on the show, right, but then also suggests bands that can be on the show. Right. And obviously there was loads of bands that was such a rampant time. I'd also worked for Janice Long up in Liverpool on Radio Merseyside, and we had been she'd used that facility of having a studio that you could put a band in, in the Liverpool area, to great advantage. So there was loads of people who'd come through that show, and and then I did that for a load of Channel 4 shows. There was a show called The Switch that was a London-based Tube replacement. There was a show on Sunday mornings called APB. It was a really great time for music telly. Not all of those shows were great, but great things came from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
if you think about Muriel Gray championing on the Tube, when she championed, that was a turning point for Simpler Minds when they were championed by the Tube. That New Gold Dream album, would it have had that impact if it hadn't had that showcase? You know what I mean?
Well, it was for me. I mean, I love Simple Minds, and I've seen them a number of times. But YouTube, you two were just on the ascendance as well, and they were comparable in my mind. The way that they produced and played, but you had Paulie Yates, you had Jules Holland on there as well, if I remember rightly, as presenters. Yeah. And then, as you say, that some of the now, did you mention there's a band called Swans Way? Yeah, and they did a track called Soul Train. I think.
Yeah, they were amazing. So actually, Maggie Dumond is still a really great mate of mine.
No way.
And Maggie was in. After that, it was her and Rick in Scarlet Fantastic. And they were one of the bands at the Tube champions. So they were doing their demos up in Brum, and then they got on the Tube. Tube made that fantastic film about No Memory, and they were spotted by none less than Pete Waterman, who signed them to PWL, and they made that 24 Hours album for him. So loads of great things happened for people as a result of being on that show. UB40 set up their record label, and the first access they gave to anyone was via the Tube, and it had, it was called Def. And they'd signed Winston Reedy, and there was a really great local band called Echo Bass. And then, basically they were championing, Brummie talent, but using national media to do it.
But Signing Off is one of the best albums of all time. That is just iconic. I'll tell you what that reminds me of. That reminds me of the Iranian embassy. Because it all coincided at the same time. But Earth Dies Screaming is probably one of the best 12-inch records that I've got in my collection. It's just such a good. I mean, we could talk about this sort of thing for hours, but I love that side of UB40. I'm not so keen on the newer stuff, but the early stuff.
I really loved the idea that lots of people were on. So there was a lot of people on the dole in Brum. And lots of people were signing on and then going and spending their dole money on that record. I kind of loved the real cultural interplay of that. And it wasn't lost on me at the time because, I did it.
Yeah, no, there was. 1 in 10 is a classic. That is what it's all about, isn't it? It's about the 1 in 10 people that were unemployed at that particular time. And of course, the Tube had the Jam and Weller, and then you saw them morph into the Style Council, and of course Bruce Foxton now he heads from the Jam with Russell Hastings, who are very good live, I have to say. But is music your first love? I mean, music production, television production, or is there, or are there other genres that you particularly like?
When I was at university, I was on a hybrid degree that was production and then lots of academic stuff. So it's a joint thing in psychology and sociology and all of those things. But I was a girl on the course who didn't really like me very much, and she gave me the nickname of Mr. Media, which I think she thought was an insult. But it's kind of a true expression of me. There isn't a bit of media that I'm not interested in. So, music, writing about music got me into writing about other things like cultural stuff and then politics and all sorts of things. I don't see them as separate things or disciplines. They're things that they're expressions of how I am. If I don't have music in my life, I really miss it. So I think one of the great tragedies of the internet has been the damage it's done to music and the music business, but also music television. It's that thing of now the ratings chasing has become so extreme that there's no room for anything that is considered to be niche. And so, that's why we've only got, Jules Holland's Hootenanny, which in my life is too short to have on. I know it does a service, and and if there's somebody, so the Manics were on the first episode of this series, so of course I looked at it on iPlayer. I don't think it's the best. I think it should be there, but I think it should be there with 20 other shows that do music and do music.
I agree.
And so it's there and it does its job and well done. But I think there's a terrible tick box about it where people think, oh yeah, job done, and then I think there's, and it's that thing of I've got a need for more than 5 artists a week. Thanks very much.
Yeah, because you're absolutely right, and he has some really good emerging talent on there. And I've got a playlist of albums that I will just put on that I've listened where I've watched Jules Holland, but there aren't enough of him. And I saw it earlier on. You've got your MTV mug. MTV actually, video killed the radio star, didn't it? That really did happen. But I don't know, because it doesn't matter what TV channel you put on that's music based, it regurgitates and it's not good regurgitation sometimes.
Well, so that mergers and acquisitions thing that happens is the thing that does my head in. It's like, what's wrong with MTV? That they've got, up until they stopped doing music television properly, they had every day in music history from 1982 onwards.
Yeah.
What the hell? That's just sitting in an archive somewhere. You know, that's gold. It's valuable. And if, you know, and if you go down the music section of the Sky TV, EPG or Freeview, you know, they're all the same, those channels.
Yeah.
And no one has had the insight to do like a talking pictures of music telly. I mean, Guy Garvey does From the Vaults on Sky Arts, and it's over reliant on the Tube archive, which has been, you know, pillaged elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like a pop believes itself vibe. But
Yes.
it's that thing. There's loads and loads of really great stuff, you know, that they're not doing anything with. And if you look at like BBC Four is, you know, if the BBC knew that it was going to be so over reliant on Top of the Pops, why did it get rid of it? What the hell? So when we look back on these years, what are they going to show?
Yeah,
they're going to be showing somebody miming on Jonathan Ross, really?
Yeah, that absolutely. But the problem with Top of the Pops, and I vividly remember seeing an anniversary broadcast of Top of the Pops, and of course Jimmy Savile was presenting. So there's loads of stuff that they can't use because these people have been cancelled because of their poor behaviour over the years. And as you say, Thursday evenings or whatever evening it was, we all sat down and watched Top of the Pops. We listened to the countdown on a Sunday. We found out what was number one on a Sunday afternoon. So these experiences are not going to be experienced by up and coming. And there's, you know, true musicians, the people that actually make music, they're few and far between now, because you can do it, I can do it on my iPhone.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, so I've got, because, well, for loads of reasons, like, you know, if they gave me the battery life that would be able to support all the things that the phone can do, then I might try a few of them. But I'd much rather it stayed alive rather than was exhausted, you know, half an hour after venturing out. Can't wear headphones in public. It's ridiculous. So I don't use any of that stuff. And it's like I think there's a place for stuff. Like I never got rid of, I had all my mates who were like, oh, I got rid of all my vinyl and I put it all on CD and then that CD onto this thing and that thing. I never got rid of anything. I've got it all. You know, I've got reel-to-reel, 8-track, cassettes. You know, I've got the lot in mini discs. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just a device. Use the device. What's wrong?
Well, I was a massive listener of John Peel. I absolutely adore John Peel. And in fact, I'm going to interview a guy called Ray Gelato, who was the lead for a band called the Chevalier Brothers, and they did some great stuff. It was Louis Jordan sort of inspired, and they were championed by John Peel. But again, you know, sitting in your bedroom at 10 o'clock at night listening to the radio because you knew you were going to get the Meteors, the Smiths, all the really good King Kurt, all the bands that I absolutely adored would be Ex-Mail Deutschland, the Cult, or the Southern Death Cult as they were then. You would get these people, but I'm not sure whether those breakthrough bands are going to come into.
He was amazing in another sense, in that he also was that premium broadcaster who really understood how audiences listened. Yeah. So it would always build into an annual momentum where he would reward the listeners with the Festive 50, which was curated by the listeners. So he really understood that, making the actual listener an active part of the show, you know. And also, you know, his producer was John Waters, and who was a genius, like an absolute genius, like practically an everyday philosopher.
Yeah,
and that interplay between those kind of personalities that understood that the listening thing was an experience rather than just background.
Yeah, absolutely. But he went across so many years and introduced so many brilliant bands. But anyway, we better get back to speaking about you, sir, because otherwise we could talk about musical history for forever and ever. Amen.
I think that would be better.
No, I don't. So So you're at the BBC and
Yeah.
you've moved on to other things. What was the inspiration to form Free at Last?
Because I got into the habit of inventing my own work, which is what I'd done before I did the BBC scheme. And at the end, the BBC scheme was interesting because I wasn't really treated anywhere like a trainee because I was older. So when I used to go to places, they were expecting a 21-year-old and they got 30-year-old me with, a face like a smacked ass going, all right, what do you want me to do? And then because I kind of made myself part and parcel of it wherever I went. And so there was a department I went to and I invented a show. And then they gave me a producer credit. And then at the end of the scheme, the BBC said, yes, well done for 2 years of very hard work, but now we'd like you to go and be an assistant producer on Watchdog. And I went, nah, I'm not doing that. And because I'd done a good bit of music, a chunk of music, I produced The Ozone and I'd worked on music stuff, other shows that had music in them. Somebody I'd worked for at the BBC had just left and was setting up a music show at ITV that was going to be live for teenagers, Saturday mornings, half an hour, called The Noise. And they said, well, if you don't want to do that, come and produce The Noise. So I was one of the producers on this show. So I left the BBC, and turned down 13.5 grand a year to be miserable as sin, pretending to be on the phone behind Anne Robinson on Watchdog. And I went to work for a lot more money at ITV, producing a live music show for teenagers. Very proud of the moment that we booked Metallica and they got us wrapped by the ITC for singing the wrong song with swear words in the middle of it. Because they were so loud, a kid in the audience wet herself in the studio. Those things, everything from occupational hazards. But so basically then I kind of invented a lot of things, but then everything's so genre based in telly that the specialist companies. So, the kids music show was coming from Granada. Then I went back to the BBC to do another music show. After that got cancelled. And then I invented a science show, and the science show could only be made by the BBC in-house science department. And then there were two indies that specialised in science, Brook Lapping and Uden. So every 6 months I was moving desk. I was in-house, out-house, in-house, out-house, and it was generally stuff that I'd invented. So Free at Last came from the need for me to have a roof over everything that I did. And also I was still managing comedy and music and writing and doing all sorts of other things. So Free at Last was the roof I built to house all the things that I needed protecting from the elements. And it just allowed me to have one desk.
And how does it work? I mean, you've spoken of many things, and there'll be people listening to this who haven't got a clue. But you get an idea, or somebody comes to you with an idea. There's so much work that goes into getting that idea on the screen, isn't there? It doesn't just happen. You don't just push a button and hope for the best.
I think we're all inherently inventors. I think the big thing that for me is that I knew that invention was my escape, and invention would take me to where I needed to be. So the thing about me though is that I invent with the view that, well, I'll kill to make this happen. So I don't act on every idea I have. Also, the other thing is that I never ever think that a program or anything is ever executed by just me. I have a great team and I know great people to work with, and I love collaboration. There's an old cliche they say about telly is that, one person wins an award, but it takes an army to make the show. I've never lost sight of that. And I'm very aware of it every day. The thing that I also know is that everyone's looking for the next big thing. And if they knew what that was going to be, they'd be doing it, which means that there's scope for us to come up with the next big thing still. Yeah. So I never lose hope with things. I'm very dog with a bone with things though. So, I'm about to launch, I'm going to launch a podcast this year, but I invented this brand that I'm doing the podcast of in 1988. And I did it for a short amount of time on radio. I'm not going to present it this time around. but it's a show that's very close to my heart because I'm a big world music fan. And so, and then, you know, I had a big hit with a show called Martina Cole's Lady Killers, but I
Yeah.
wrote in 2008, but I wrote the treatment for that probably in 1997.
Really?
So, you know, I never think that anything's over. I just think things haven't happened. So when I invent things, I think that I know that IP lasts forever, and I know that IP is valuable. So, but I never ever think, oh, forget that, that's not going to happen. I just put it aside and then move on with whatever can happen right now. So, and it's that thing. I just think that sometimes you're ahead of a curve. Sometimes the moment's gone, but it'll come back round. You know, it's like, but they have to come back around in a different shape, and you have to be flexible enough to look at your stuff and go, oh, actually that changes everything, that will make that different. You know, Lady Killers, when it was invented, was just called Lady Killers, and it was about female serial killers. Then one of my best friends, Martina Cole, somebody said to me she should be on telly, and I hadn't thought of that because she's me mate. And then I suddenly went, I know exactly the show that she should do. And then Lady Killers happened. And Lady Killers is still on telly now.
Wow.
You know, all them years later.
How did you meet her?
Mistaken identity. I was filming, we were doing a show for ITV called Super Sleuths, which was the literary origins of 6 of ITV's most famous detectives.
Right.
And I wanted to put some authors, some crime writers into the mix, but we would only use certain sound bites from them right at the top of the show to say who Morse was, who Frost was, who Wycliffe was. And I thought if we went to a literary festival, we could get those people just for 5 minutes, and it wouldn't matter to them that it wasn't they wouldn't have the time to give me an hour, but I could probably get 10 minutes with each of them, and I could probably get the sound bites that I needed. So we got the permission to do it from our lovely friends Anne and Claire at Harrogate Crime Writers Festival. And we rocked up, and then the day before, there was these double doors, and they kind of opened, and then there was this little blonde bombshell sitting there, and she looked at me and she went, "Are you Barry?" And I went, "Yeah." And I went, "Yeah." And then she said to my researcher at the time, "I'll have a gin and tonic, love." And then me and her were chatting away, and then about an hour later, a man came over on a walking frame, and he went, "Martina Cole, I've been waiting for you for an hour and a half."
No way.
And she said to me, she went, "Who are you?" And I went, "Barry." She went to him, "Who are you?" He went, "Barry double barreled something." And then she said to me, "Who are you?" And I went, "I'm Barry Ryan, I'm interviewing you tomorrow." And that's where a beautiful friendship started.
Fantastic. No, very, very talented lady. And of course, you have worked throughout your career with very talented people, haven't you? I mean, the stuff with Agatha Raisin, which is your flagship, I would suggest, I might be wrong, but the cast in that, and it's a cult television program, isn't it, on Sky? How did you get involved with Agatha?
That's a telly thing, so there's a load of television drama is a really different world to factual telly. There's a lot more posh people. And when we announced that we were doing Agatha, I remember posh television drama people going to me, how are you doing that? And it was that thing, I bought the rights, how do you do yours? So basically, somebody who was hiring a desk in our office went to meet a friend of his who was working at a publishing company called Constable and Robinson. And then he came back with the Agatha Raisin books, and he said, "Oh, I told them that I was working at a telly office, and they said, oh, get them to read these should be on telly." And there was a train strike on, and I thought, I'll set out later so I'm not in the chaos of the train strike bit. So I started reading the book, and then I realized when I finished the book it was midnight, and then I thought to myself, yeah, why aren't these on Sunday night ITV? What the hell? So then I investigated, and after a long process, because the author MC Beaton, who's a genius, had been burnt by television before when she'd had Hamish Macbeth adapted, so she wouldn't entertain the idea of telly. So I had to go and persuade her. I had a 7-hour lunch with her and her husband, where at the end of it she kind of squinted her eyes at me and went, "All right, I'll give you a go." And then it took me 7 years to get it commissioned. So television drama is the long game.
Wow.
A very long game. We went through development hell with ITV with that show, and then Sky was the perfect home for us when in 2014 when we got it commissioned. One of the things I'd say about I do have worked with really great people, but I always think that my job as a producer is to facilitate them. I'm the function, they are the event, and it's my job to make that thing all come together and happen. And it's I always think television, when I was that 5-year-old looking at the telly thinking it was a miracle, I've never lost that wonder, and I've never also lost that ability to see that what we do sometimes is miraculous. You know what I mean? Like if you look at Mike, the cast that we've got on Agatha, that was put together. How Agatha was commissioned is a very long story, but we had for 3.5 weeks to put that cast together, and just by a miracle, those great people were available. And I don't know, that show wouldn't be the show that we have without the people that we have. So and television is a sum of its parts. The whole thing accumulates, and underneath it, there's this mad network of sometimes really conflicting things that then conspire to make something kind of wonderful. And then, it's your job to manage that. Somebody once said to me, what does a producer do? And I went, well, everything up until the point that it's done. And then some things after that, because it's never done. I get some, Lady Killers is on now, and so, I'll get emails from people fact checking me and telling me that, and why have you, and they're asking questions about the show. So it's never done really, because you put it out there, and in this day and age when everything's recycled and everything's repeated and everything has to stay on the shelf for a million years, that's, I'd hate to be somebody that was on Family Fortunes in 1978 with Bob Monkhouse, because when I'm watching Challenge TV, I'm just so hugely aware that I'm watching dead people winning cheese maids. You know what I mean?
I do that. I don't know about you, but if I watch a film, I think, I wonder who's still alive out of this lot. Because I watched Mary Poppins, and I've forgotten her name, Detrice, Roy Detrice's youngest daughter was Michelle. In it. And no, there's another daughter, and she is 69 now. So she was a real child at that time, and of course the young man that played the boy in it, he passed away at the age of 22. I mean, this is really sad. I could do a Trivial Pursuit question on it. And then David Tomlinson's son is a barrister in Chelmsford. He's probably retired now himself, but he was a barrister at Chelmsford Crown Court.
And a very good filmmaker and a very good screenwriter.
Really?
Yeah. So there was a chance years ago, about 15 years ago, a friend of mine was working with him and brought us the script. We couldn't do anything about it at the time because we didn't have any finance, but it was a very, very, very strong script.
Ashley Jensen is currently in Shetland, if I remember rightly, and we've been watching that, and her skill is absolutely immense. And my wife watches Agatha, and when she met you for the very first time, she was overwhelmed because Agatha Raisin, she's told all her friends. But it's brilliant, and it's a great world as an interloper for a voyeur, if you like, somebody looking in like me. Don't forget, I did 30 years in the police service. I got in front of a camera when there was a robbery or something serious had happened at a bank or on the street. So I'd be standing there, and I had nothing to do with this, and it was by chance that I got involved, and working alongside you guys, and you sit and listen to my harebrained ideas, and that was the inspiration for doing this. With you.
You know what though? There's a thing, right? In the same way that when I was single, if I was ever chatted up by somebody and they said, "Oh, you're a dentist," and then you started talking to the policemen or crime professionals when you make a crime drama is a really hairy experience, because it's like, oh God, don't look too closely. We've done there's poetic license everywhere all over the show.
Well, that's no difference to the police service. The smoke and mirrors in the police service is as great there as it is in the media, because at the end of the day, you've got to make things look bright and shiny so that the public trust you, and that's half of it.
There's a big thing that I'm addressing in the next series, because we're going to do the next series this year, and it's that thing that I think that most shows get wrong, that I really loved about Happy Valley, that that there are consequences of crime. So we actually, me and one of the writers wrote a document called The Consequences of Crime, where we wanted to look at what the collective PTSD of our core cast characters would be. And it's a really, I just think it's a bit of a gift to the fans as well, to acknowledge that if these people who they've identified with and bought into as a collective, even if we're a bit Scooby-Doo in our approach, that it would have an impact. Do you know what I mean? That there would be. So Jodie's character, which is called Tony, she's got a photographic memory, so she loses that ability, and it's because she doesn't want to remember some of the things that she's seen.
Yeah.
It's the common sense of it. Like if we'd witnessed all of that stuff, there would be an imprint on us.
But the impact of crime is quite overwhelming. Whether it's if someone stole your car off of your drive, it has a massive impact. It may not cause you PTSD, but I always find it quite amazing that people absolutely love the true crime genre. They are absolutely engrossed with it. They some people cannot get enough of the true crime.
Massive.
It's huge, and I've only ever watched one thing that I've been in. Honestly, because
how come I've watched 4?
Yeah, I'm quite conscious of it. Anyway. But and what next then? So you've got Agatha ready.
So we're kind of voracious with the right. So as well, are we allowed to say that we've developed a show with you?
Yeah, of course you can.
I also have a factual company. So Free at Last makes the dramas, and then Format Factory makes the factual stuff. So we've won a few awards for the stuff we've done. So we've got a couple of true crime things going on, including a Moors Murders 2-parter that is in line with the 2 anniversaries for the Moors this year, and they're victimology shows, so we are not looking at all at Myra and Ian. We're looking at because I think that needs to be we have to realign the focus, and we have to stop celebrating criminals and look at the wider picture, and so we're addressing that. But then we've got other shows that are nothing to do with crime. So we're doing the Antiques Clothes show, we're doing a kind of sustainability car refurbishment show based on classic cars, and a load of other things. Some we're intending to do a music pilot.
Yeah. So, and of course, you're kind enough to have taken me under your wing, and hopefully we can get some work together with one of the channels if they like what we've put together and the format of it.
Absolutely. Then in terms of Free at Last, what's coming is we've got a lot of IP and rights, and we've just boarded a show that we were asked to come on board with called Inspector Singh, based on the lovely novels by Shamini Flint, which is a Pacific Rim show. So it's Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, a Sikh detective, really charming, lovely show. And then we're also rebooting Frost, so we're doing the Frost prequels. So as Endeavour was to Morse, we're doing First Frost, based on the lovely prequel novels. And then we've got a load of these things. There's a really great author called Ian Moore who wrote a set of books which are called the kind of Folly Valley Mysteries. So we bought the rights to those, and we've had the script written. And so how we always do it is that we'll buy the rights, then we'll invest in a script with a writer who understands the source material, and then we take that to market.
I love Ian. I listened to his books driving through France, and I laughed and cried in equal measure because he is such a talented bloke. And then I became a stalker. I did, because I'm into the mod music and that scene, and that's his big thing. I love his stand-up. I think he's brilliant as a comedian. Unfortunately, he doesn't perform as often now, and he does more the corporate side. And these cozy crime books, I mean, I met him at a book signing in the summer. I've met him a couple of times, I'm pleased to say, and he's going to come on here as a guest. And he's so talented, and I think that those books would translate perfectly to television. I just think it's got
Who do
everything
you
there.
who do you think should be Richard?
Oh, I don't know. Joanne did mention a name, but I really don't know. It's got to be Hugh Bonneville or someone like that. I just think that they've got that sort of classic piece about them. But
Approaches have been made, but I can't tell you to who.
no, well, that's cool. But I
I
look
can
forward
tell
to
you that the Canadian show that we're doing, the Welsh Canadian forensic anthropologist and archaeologist Kate Morgan, written by the spectacularly talented Kathy Ace. I can tell you who we have approached for that, or who we've attached to that, because that's public knowledge. So it's Eve Miles.
Wow.
And we want Bud to be Jason Priestley.
What an exciting year you've got ahead. Of course, part of your life, your working life, you were involved in a Chinese television company. How did you get involved with that?
Fortune. So we made a successful show and it made a lot of money. And then the distributor that we had, before they gave us any of the money we've earned, went bust.
Oh.
And so, it was either let Free at Last go down the Swanee, or what we really did, and it was the cleverest move we made, was that I took a job and then David ran. So David also runs all my companies with me and owns them. So he kept the Free at Last flag flying, and I took a job. I didn't want to do anything where people would think that Free at Last had gone away. So I wanted to work, but I didn't want to work. I was offered Saturday night things that I would have had to open a vein to do, right? But so I didn't. And then the headhunter, I got involved with the headhunter who said, there's this, and would you? And it was basically to be the head of programs for a Chinese TV channel that was on Sky called Propeller. And I was only meant to be there for 3 months, and I ended up doing a year and a half. I actually left on my 50th birthday. So my leaving due was my 50th birthday. But and Agatha had just been commissioned, so it was a real, it was a really great thing to have done. But it was a very odd job, because it was a channel that was based here, that also had a presence in Beijing. And it was a kind of, when I kind of went there, it had I think about 2 hours of very old and acquired programming, and then it was making one original series that was called Lifestyler, which was absolutely genius, where it had UK Chinese students making shows about British experiences. So it was things to do in England from a Chinese perspective. Really well produced, very clever, fun show. And then, so I came up with a strategy for them where I themed each day. Monday was business, Tuesday was lifestyle, Wednesday was culture, Thursday was travel, and Friday was music. And then we also then had some shopping hours, and then we farmed our weekend hours out to another. We did compilations, but then we farmed our weekend hours out. But basically, I kind of invented a 12-hour schedule that then we repeated. So when I left, it went from 2 hours to 24 hours of continuous programming.
Wow.
But I had a real ball doing it. And I did go to China 3 times.
Oh, did you? Where did you go to?
Shanghai. I went to Beijing, Shanghai, and Chengdu. It was kind of amazing. But of course, it was out of body. And again, the accent thing was a problem, because I can't speak a word of Mandarin, not one. And I didn't want to do the patronizing thing of going ni hao everyone, and nodding my head. People had to translate for me everywhere I went. And I was once in the middle of a presentation in Beijing, I don't know, about 1,000 people. And the translator was doing her thing. And then I noticed that at one point she kind of went like that, because she hadn't understood a word of what I was saying. So, so you take your, whoever you are and whatever you are, you take it with you wherever you go. But it really kind of reminded me that I was actually quite good at some of the things I'd actually stopped doing. You know, I was decent as a scheduler. I was quite good at doing live. I was good at strategizing. I was good at flogging. So yeah, I had a really, and we nurtured some fantastic people came through that thing who've become friends, but also some fantastic people have come through that who we're still working with now. It was great.
I love Chengdu. I went out there. I went to Chongqing, and Chengdu. A client took me out there. What an experience! I would go back there tomorrow. I thought it was an amazing place and very hospitable. Very.
God, I loved it. I really loved China, and I really liked. I loved Shanghai because it felt like it felt really modern, and it felt it felt really open.
Yeah, no, it's a great. You couldn't. I mean, your parents are no longer with us. Am I right?
Yep.
What would they say now? I mean, Barry Ryan, this kid from Birmingham who had the balls to say to a television company, "You're not doing it right," is now producing stuff that has been shown across the world. I wonder what your mum and dad would say.
I remember when I first moved to London, and I was I'd supposed to live with my aunt in Brixton, but 2 days in, I'd met someone and I was having a better time than I might have been having with her. And yeah, and Channel 4 used to have this video box that used to go the length of the country and it was on a show called Right to Reply, where you could give your opinions on telly. And so there was something on that I really disagreed with, and I think it was to do with Irish history, and I can't remember the ins and outs of what I said, but basically the video, I went past somewhere where the video booth was plunked, and I think it might have been in Hackney. I can't remember where it was, but it was somewhere, and it was there, and I thought, oh right. So I went into the box, and my dad said to my sister, I was sure I was watching television yesterday and Barry was on it, right? And he and then when I went home, he said it to me, and I said, yeah, I did do something. I said, God, did they show it? Because I didn't have a telly, so I didn't even know. Yeah, so there's 4 of us, and they raised us to be how we are. You know, I'm the youngest of 4, and I've got 3 elder sisters, and I think my fierce and my fearless comes from my parents, but down through my sisters. So, you know, I inherited a lot of knowledge from them because they lived through everything before me.
Yeah.
So they, you know, I'm the wisdom that's born probably of a collective pain. They would say that the pain is the other way around. But I think there's a particular thing that my parents knew that we would be capable of doing, and they encouraged it. I think my mum was always scared that I would get burnt, or that I'd be. I think she tried to protect me from disappointment, and of course you can't. You just can't. So my mum saw some of it, and you know, she was always my biggest champion. She was always looking for my name in the credits and things. And then when Agatha happened, I'm trying to work out. Yeah, she did. She saw she saw a bit of Agatha before she got ill, but not much of it, because she wouldn't get Sky, and she didn't have a smart telly. You know, my mum still had one of those telly that had a 25-inch back. Right?
Yeah.
So it was only after her illness that she, when she was deaf, that she saw it. So I think she saw it mute. And then when I finally got the subtitled versions of the first series through, because it took, for a load of bullshit reasons, it took a long time. She'd been 4 days dead.
Oh.
So she never saw it at its height, but I know she'd have loved it. And I know that she was really, really proud of. I know that she was really, really proud of me.
Yeah, no, of course, and as we are as well, mate. You're a good man, Barry. Thank you so much for your time today. The future is very bright, and I wish you every
I hope so. I mean, the big thing I say about me is that I just do my thing my way, and sometimes that makes things take a bit longer. But for me to do it and to do it comfortably, I have to work with what I have, and that's just me.
Yeah. I must ask you though, before you go, what do you watch?
Oh God. So I'm hugely frustrated by telly at the minute because, and I've said this all over Christmas, because suddenly I'm in front of the telly all day, every day, and there isn't anything, like I found myself going on iPlayer and watching, because they've got a load of stuff on iPlayer from way back. There's a load of Man Alives, and there's yesterday I was watching a show that was made in 2003 about the Brighton bombing of the Tory party conference. And it's kind of interesting to, and obviously it's a slower grammar and all of that, but it's really, but in terms, like, when I flick through and it's just formulaic crap like A Place in the Sun, let's go to the country, location, all of that stuff, and then forward a bit. When it's all that stuff that's been so honed down that there's no room for anyone in it to shine or to thrive. And that's all that seems to be on telly at the minute, And then, we were talking about music stuff earlier. I should have been really excited about Sophie Ellis-Bextor's Kitchen Disco New Year's Eve thing, but I couldn't get excited about it because it felt formulaic, And I can't watch, I can't. Also, this whole thing where, why is Wheel of Fortune on? What the hell are they doing bringing You Bet back? What the hell? I just don't get what's happening.
If we went back to those halcyon days of 3 TV channels, BBC One, ITV, and BBC Two that started at midday and finished at 10 o'clock at night, I'm not sure that the TV industry would be where it is now, because there are lots of people that, this is social media, but it gives me the opportunity to put it on a platform, which means people can watch this on their television if they want.
Yeah.
It's bonkers, isn't it?
Right. So you asked me what I'm watching. I have really loved. I really like. I watch a lot of international telly. So there's a really great Italian show called Lolita La Bosco, feature-length crime stories, but in Puglia. So it's absolutely beautiful to look at. And it's about a woman who returns to her hometown as a chief of police, and all the relationships that from her past that have to find a new footing. It's a great show. I really like a very dark French show called Crimson Rivers, based on the original film and also, of course, the original novels, which has got starring Oliver Marchant. It's really gory and really pagan. There's a lot of mad, dark, historical stuff going on in that show. I really love a New Zealand show called The Brokenwood Mysteries. I think it's one of the best cozy crimes out there. It's absolutely genius. It's probably on series 10, but its storytelling has never waned. It really knows who its audience is, and it knows who its characters are. I really admire that. I always think continuity of character is something that people sometimes throw away. If your audience buys into your characters, don't betray them by making them do stupid stuff just for a sake of an episode. You know what I mean? People believe them, they feel real to them. So you've got to honour that and serve that. Your writers have got to serve that. I'm trying to think about British stuff. What do I watch? I thought the thing with Keira Knightley was really good, actually. And I don't normally like Ben Whishaw, and I don't normally like Keira Knightley, but Black Doves, I actually thought it was really good.
I loved it.
It was really good, and also I felt it was really transformative for both of them. I mean, both of their characters were so layered and so contradictory and really interesting, but also then there was lovely cameos in the middle of that show, in a beautiful way. Also, I really loved, like, that's going to become like Die Hard, because the signature of Christmas was all the way through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's going to become a Christmas watch for people.
And Sarah Lancashire, absolutely. I thought that was phenomenal. I wondered if that had been written by the people that did Slow Horses, because it had that
had the same vibe, didn't it?
which
No,
I love.
it
I
was a
love
single. It was a single writer, and I can't remember his name. But God, he's upped his game spectacularly with that show. I thought it was great.
Yeah,
And
no.
also, and that, it took me because people were talking to me. Did you recommend it to me? And I said to you, "Well, I'm not going to watch that because I don't like them." And then I
don't
had
know.
to get over myself.
May have been because I really did. I really enjoyed it. I'm not an avid television watcher. I'm pretty crap when it comes to that. But I really enjoyed that. And Slow Horses and Black Doves, I just thought were absolutely out of this world.
That terrible thing when they end, and you're like, "Oh no, no."
Yeah, yeah, I know.
So I watched the first of the last series, hooray, of Vera last night. And it is that, right? And it's that thing where you think, yeah, of course, she'd have retired 10 years ago. Of course she would.
She would.
But
Yeah.
No. That's not the story. The story is that she's up for promotion. I mean, come on.
Yeah. No, I like Vera.
Yeah, so do I. That's why we're here.
But you see, it's like Dixon and the Dock Green. Okay, Dixon and the Dock Green. When Jack Warner became Dixon, he'd have been retired 10 years at that point. He's buried in East London Cemetery, actually. But yeah. It's like I say, I'm pretty good in pub quizzes, but yeah, it's got to become relatable to the critic. And talk about formula. I mean, whatever I may or may not think of EastEnders, actually people buy into it, don't they? Same with Coronation Street. They buy into it because that's the lives that they can portray.
Because so with continuing drama, I think there's a thing, right? So I, of course, watched EastEnders when it started, right? And I was kind of in awe of it because it was so new and all of that. And it was up against, remember, Terrible Albion Market, right? It's that thing of like, of course that was going to win. But now, so I know Colin Salmon, and Colin Salmon's in it now. And so I start watching it just because Colin's in it, because I want to see what's happening, right?
Yeah.
But then you have to remember that some people have never seen any of the history of EastEnders, and they're coming to it now, and all they know about Walford is what's in Walford now. So I think that there's a thing where every show has its timeline, and your role as a part of that audience has its own fixed period.
Yes.
Where because I always watch it comparing it to what I know EastEnders used to be.
Yeah.
Right. So there's only one soap that I regularly catch up with, and that's Emmerdale. And I'll tell you why. One, it really, really knows what it is, and it really knows its precinct. And it does cast really good people, but also it really knows its writers, and its writers really know the show. Some of the best writing, and I look out for writers through Emmerdale. I don't look at any of the other soaps with a view on writing. I've never looked at Casualty or Holby with that eye on that I have on Emmerdale when I watch Emmerdale, because Emmerdale knows how to run a story, and it also knows how to serve actors, and that's through writing. Every show lives or dies on the strength of its writing.
So during your writing, you wrote for The Face, which I absolutely loved, and I've still got copies of The Face here. Rankin Roger was on one, and you got Paul Weller's on the front of the other one, and there's all that. And of course, you wrote for Smash Hits. Now, Smash Hits was an iconic teen magazine at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was absolutely. And of course, the Pet Shop Boys, I think I'm right, were formed out of Smash Hits, weren't they?
Neil was the editor of Smash Hits.
So they
genuinely, they met in a record shop, so they picked each other up in a record shop in that 80s way that you did. But he was in the music business in that he was the editor of Smash Hits. And he'd been a staff writer before, I think, but I was a freelancer, so it was just so basically I wrote for a magazine that was called Jamming, which was set up by Tony Fletcher, who was a tube presenter but also a musician that was in a kind of mod band, and he was part of the mod scene, and out of that came a magazine. So we'd done a fanzine, and then the fanzine became professional, and then I was submitting stuff remotely, and then there was somebody called Steve Taylor, who also had a chat show on Channel 4 called Loose Talk, liked one of my things and asked me to contribute. Another mad thing had happened the very same week, in that I was going out with somebody much older than me, whose mate was the receptionist in Crossroads. You know, the one, she was called Mandy. She was called Mandy, and people used to walk into the frame and give her their keys, but she wasn't allowed to speak because she was equity walk on 2 or something. But she had a singing residency in the Holiday Bin in Birmingham. So this Sunday night we went to see her at the singing, and it was Mandy, the receptionist from Crossroads. And at the bar, I was talking to whoever I was with quite loudly about something cultural. And the person next to us at the bar chipped in, and he turned out to be Jack Tinker, who was the theatre critic for the Daily Mail. And he had been to see a show in Birmingham and thought it was rubbish. And I was like, and we ended up chatting, and he said, and I said that I was writing for stuff, and this, that, and the other. And he said, you must send me some of your things. And I thought nothing of it. But the person I was with had given them his card, and he'd rung the club that he managed and, asked if I would get in touch. And he said, there's a show on and I can't get there. Would you go and review it for me? So I ended up subbing for Jack Tinker.
Wow.
He didn't use my name. I wrote in the style of him, which was kind of an amazing thing. And then this very same week, I met a woman in London called Fiona Russell-Powell, who was a regular contributor to Blitz and The Face, and a magazine called City Limits that I also contributed to.
Yeah.
And she championed me, and that's how I ended up writing for those particular things.
Wow.
And she really she used to, because I had a big spiky head, she used to say, spiky by style and spiky by nature. That's why you all work. And she encouraged me to do all the bitchy shit that I did, because, that was my shtick at the time.
You're talking about a time that I loved. All right. I drive along now with no hair, thinking about those halcyon days. But from an iconic perspective, you've got your Vivienne Westwoods. Did you ever get to meet any of these people?
I didn't meet Viv. I met Malcolm, because I did some documentaries about punk years later. But I met him. I'd really love to have met him around the time when he was doing stuff like the Parry album and the Double Dutch stuff. I think.
Yeah.
I think some of that stuff that he did was, the opera stuff. He was really brave. He was a bit of a tosser when he talked, but he was brave musically, I think, in terms of the things that he tried to do. Let me think. Who I met that I was really in awe of. Well, I met Bananarama really early on in their career. And, they're a band I went to see last year who I still love. But I really love Shakespeare's Sister, like beyond. And I love the fire of Siobhan.
Yeah.
I love it. And every single thing that she's ever recorded, I'm slightly obsessed with. And when you meet people with that energy, like, I love energy. I feed on people's energy. I like people, and I can spot people who are doers. There's lots of people who, we've all met them. There's all the talkers, but my thing is to do. Yeah. If I say I'm going to do something, generally I do it, or I'll die trying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But you've met some of the greats in music, haven't you?
I have, but I'd have to think about that long and hard to remember them. Just because when you do music shows and when you write about stuff and you're sent to do stuff and all of that, it doesn't all merge. It's just that thing of you forget, because it's just you've done a lot. You've done a wall of stuff.
Yeah. And
you never think about it as being special at the time. It's a job, and you go and do your job. I was working with Brumbeat, and the the journalist. I went in to interview Susie backstage at
Ah,
Birmingham Odeon 1970, the Join Hands tour,
yeah,
which was a very difficult tour for them because they'd split up and Robert Smith had been drafted in and all of
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then basically the woman from Sounds missed the train and she couldn't get there. So they said, would you do an interview for her? So then I did this thing and this woman got my cassette and then she wrote an interview with them based on the stuff I'd asked. And that was like even I wasn't credited again, but it was that amazing thing that somebody who was doing it for a proper job said to me, thank you so much, you did a great job. And here's 200 quid. You know what I mean? So it was that amazing thing that, I was very lucky to be championed. And I think people from where I come from have to be championed. And so when I look out, I try and do that.
Yeah, but you do make your own luck as well, don't you? If you work hard, then good things happen to good people. Robert Smith, I absolutely adore The Cure. I love The Cure, and in 1990, they played at Crystal Palace Bowl, and they had the Farm supporting them, and I blagged my way into the VIP area and sat next to family members of Robert Smith and a very famous, and I won't name her, musical artist who was partaking in things that she probably shouldn't have been. Don't forget that I was a young copper at the time, so that was an enlightening experience. And did you ever get to meet the people from Tiswas?
Yeah, I did, all of them. So Peter Tomlinson, who was the guy who invented it, who they used to have on, he was a continuity announcer.
Right.
I met him. I worked with Tarrant. I met Sally James because there was a chance that she might have done this daytime chat show thing that I was slated on as a producer, and it was going to be 4 hosts, and she was one of the shortlisted women. Obviously, I've met Lenny loads just because of comedy, entertainment, all of that stuff. Yeah, they're beautiful people.
How fantastic,
and then that weird thing where you come full circle and you're just chatting. So it's a weird thing.
Yeah, that little lad that was sitting there watching them in awe, and then all of a sudden you're sitting across the table having a cup of coffee with them.
Yeah, weird. Like I'm involved in something that's got Isla St. Clair in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Which is to do with Larry Grayson. And as a result, I ended up having a meeting with Isla St. Clair. And, my Isla St. Clair memory is I had a friend who was slightly obsessed with her. And then when she was on the Generation Game, teenage boy. So, and she was opening the Bradford and Bingley near my house. So he stayed at my house on the night before so that he could go. And we went, and Bradford and Bingley were the logo was a bowler hat.
Yes.
So she was in the window waving at people in a bowler hat. And she was there for about 2 minutes, and then somebody shot the window out with an air pistol.
No way.
And it was all over, right? And he went to me, I hope, and where I lived in Birmingham, it's called Small Heath, and he went, oh God, I hope Small Heath hasn't killed Isla St. Clair. One, it was really surreal that somebody like that would come to where I came from in Birmingham. But also, it was that thing of like, oh God, trust the Brummies.
This is a.
So I told her this story, and she went, oh my God, I remember that day.
Wow. Isla St. Clair, bloody hell.
He's very
Larry Grayson. But he was another iconic person in the entertainment world, wasn't he? Your Larry Graysons, your Tommy Coopers, your Dickie Hendersons, all these, they were proper people.
There's an amazing play about Tommy Cooper, Eric Morecambe, and Bob Monkhouse sharing a dressing room. It was a massive hit last year at the Edinburgh Festival. It goes into the West End in February. You will absolutely love it. You must go and see it. And it's written by a former children's TV presenter called Paul Hendy, right, who has found a new route for his immense talent. But the show, it was sold out every day last year for the whole of the Edinburgh Festival.
Wow.
It's an amazing show. No spoilers, but and the end of it is killer.
I'll try and get hold of Mr. Hendy. and see if you'll take part in this.
I'll introduce you.
Thank you. You're an absolute love. Barry, thank you so much for your time. Have a great 2025. I'm looking forward to having a pint of beer with you very soon. And when Mr. Moore is over from France, we'll get him along as well.
Let's do it.
God bless you, mate. And love to your other half, and I'll speak to you soon.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Lovey's A Life in Entertainment and Media. If you enjoyed this episode or any of the episodes, then please like, follow and share. Your support to me as a podcaster is invaluable. Thank you.